Tell me how high, is this good? Okay, so today we conclude our 7 sermon series on the 7 angels in the book of Revelation. It's been a very rich exploration and journey into the spiritual meaning of this particular part of Revelation, the meaning of the angels and their message to the different churches. This is Laodicea. What do you see about how this angel presents himself?
Armor.
Armor. And you notice, unlike the other angels, look at, you see the armor all the way through the body, covering the body. Very clear. Anything else that you see?
And cross on the armor.
Yes. And also, that's right, that's very important, the cross on the armor. Thank you. And then also in the left hand holding a scepter. Okay. So now we see that this is in many ways the conclusion of the journey for us. But as Swedenborg says, we go through all the stages over and over again. So each angel represents a part of our spiritual journey and path. And so this angel presents the most harsh warning. Why would that be? Let me put this angel down. Goodbye, people. So, Laodicea. The letter, which another way to refer to a letter, especially in Scripture, is an epistle. An epistle is a letter. And this letter to Laodicea was, as I just mentioned, the most harsh of all. I mean, we just heard Theron reading some pretty tough descriptions of the people being blind. And what were some other words that we heard? They were blind, they were dead. So these people were particularly struggling with what the epistle says is a lukewarm personality. Well, what does that mean? Why is it so harsh? Well, first of all, just very briefly, Laodicea was an extremely wealthy city. When the Romans overtook this city, there was a very positive increase in economic health. So you could see that the Romans were thought very positively at that time. They brought back the city. But when there was an earthquake, unlike the other cities, remember the previous city that we were talking about and how the people in the far parts of the city, in the open plains, they lived because the city was in tumult from afterquakes. Well, with this city, it was so rich because of Roman rule, so wealthy that private donators rebuilt the city quickly. So that's how rich this particular city was. Yet the angel charged them with being lukewarm. So that's interesting. What makes that a problem? Well, Swedenborg, if you dive into the spiritual depth of what Swedenborg would say, that wealth in and of itself in Laodicea, wealth actually images a person who has deep spiritual knowledge. The correspondence of wealth is someone who has spiritual understanding. So why is that so harsh for a retribution from the angel? Well, Swedenborg says that when we have a wealth of spiritual understanding, that we get into the temptation of using it for personal gain. You might ask yourself, how would I do that if I had $1 million? Well, there's 2 ways that these people in the city who were so wealthy, there's 2 ways that we, when we are rich in understanding, that we get tempted. One is power. So if we have deep spiritual knowledge, we go through a temptation to use our understanding for our personal gain. And how can I make this real to us right now? It has to do with how we talk. If we have deep spiritual understanding and knowledge, we are tempted to use our depth of mind to coerce or to manipulate in our conversations, to make our points correct. Also, the Laodiceans had the temptation. Their temptation was money. So, in other words, and especially during Advent and Christmas time, just as powerful as our faith feels, we're also very much tempted to focus on money and things. And so, with this particular city, the angel is saying, be careful. Be careful of using what you have for your own personal gain, and losing sight, being blind to what the Lord might be leading for you in your life. So, in the scriptures, we hear about the heat of spiritual understanding mixing with the cold of personal gain. And that creates the disaster of a person in any moment who is lukewarm. So when you mix hot and cold, you miss the depth of your understanding with your desire to do things for yourself alone. That's when you come into the temptation to be in the Laodicean mindset. Now, where do we see that in our country and in the world? Waco, Texas, and the Branch Davidians. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
So that's David Koresh, who professed and fancied himself to be a great spiritual leader, but led his people into death out of his own belief that he had the power over even their lives. David Koresh. And that was an extremist offshoot of Seventh-day Adventist. So many Seventh-day Adventist people are beautiful, beautiful people of faith. But you get an extremist group and you get an extremist individual whose lust for power. And you have what the angel was cautioning in the Laodicean mindset. And that's us. It's not just people long ago. It's any time we use what we know, especially the deeper spiritual principles and knowledge that we have, and we use it for our own power. We're not listening to the way that the Lord is leading in a conversation. It's so important to bring it down to everyday life. David Koresh is an extreme example of extremist offshoot Seventh-day Adventist that gets to the point of so much power that there's killing, murder. What's another example? Remember Jimmy and Tammy Faye Baker? Do you remember that couple? And how they professed such deep spiritual understanding. And for so many years, people believed them. All the while, they're building a real estate compound and wealth on the backs of their followers. And it's so dramatic to give these examples in our history, in our country's history. But again, I just want to bring it back to us that this Laodicean temptation that the angel is warning against is in us. It's every time we use what we know, especially our spiritual values and principles, to turn in conversations, in our relationships, to turn it in our will, rather than if we're really listening to where the Lord is leading us in a conversation. And even in our own attitudes, how do we use what we've been given, the rich wealth of knowledge and understanding? How do we use that in a way that the Lord is working in us, versus how we do it for our own power and greed? Now, we're thinking globally now. There's one more example that I think is interesting, and I think it's supreme in the example of what this angel is warning and cautioning us about. Can anyone think of it? It has to do with a worldwide scourge going on right
ISIS.
now. ISIS. ISIS is the supreme example of an extremist. Again, we saw it with Koresh, an extremist offshoot of Muslim holy war. This is the absolute supreme example of Muslims who are using their knowledge and their power. They're actually using the Quran to back their actions. So they're using their spiritual knowledge and understanding to terrorize, rape, and murder. And so we see, one of the lines that Theron just read, is it any wonder that the Lord wants to spit them out of his mouth? I mean, we heard this letter, this epistle to the people, and we think, oh wow, why is this so harsh? If we must, we think of these examples. We think of Waco, Texas. We think of Jimmy and Tammy Faye Baker. We think of ISIS. And these are the actions and the use of spiritual knowledge for harm that the Lord wants to spit out. He doesn't even want to keep this in his body, if you will. So all of this is so harsh, it's so tough, but it's a part of us. And it would be irresponsible as people of faith to take this message, we don't often hear from Revelation, to take this message and to just put it aside once we hear it. But really, as Advent is beginning, it's really a time to say, now look at ourselves, and to look at, as the spiritual light is increasing, and the warning and the caution and the counsel of the angel is really to look within and to say, where do you suspect you are blind? Where do you suspect you do not see? Because in the scriptures we're told there's areas where we're not seeing our lives. There's something today that the Lord can show us about something that we're not seeing in our lives. And so this really is at the end. The last half of this letter is actually, as hard as it was to listen to, the last half of this letter was a letter of encouragement and hope. And at first when I read this, and I thought to myself, wow, the last angel lesson is on the first Sunday of Advent, and I read this and how harsh it sounded. I thought, oh no, it doesn't correspond. But what does the angel say at the end? The angel says, let yourself be refined in the fire. What does that mean? Repent. It means turn around and look at the ways that you say your thoughts, your spiritual understanding to people. Look at how you talk, what you say. Do you tear people down? Do you discourage people? Do you say to someone, today is going to be a bad day, and you set a whole spirit in your home? Or do you say, today is going to be a good day? There are a lot of things that need fixing. But Lord, you can help. You can help us make a good day. Or you can say to someone, boy, you look good today. Emanuel Swedenborg has a theology of acting as if. So let's say you don't feel positive today. You can act as if you do, and that gives life. So the end of this epistle, this letter, is actually encouraging. It's saying, walk through the refiner's fire. Go into the heat of the area where you need to grow. Don't walk away. Come into the fire. And when you're done, put on a white robe. by the way. If you have to this Christmas, maybe after Christmas when the sales are good, buy yourself a white robe and put it on. After a journey in Advent of searching in the fire. Take advantage of this year. Take advantage of this season and do the refiner's fire work. Let the Lord walk into the fire with you and search your heart and mind. And when Christmas Day comes, put on that white robe. Let it be pure. Let yourself receive the innocent, pure new life of the Lord. And then the last bit of encouraging, hopeful words of this letter is that we are to anoint our eyes. Let him anoint your eyes with a salve. Wow, that's interesting. Because how many times do we see the faults in others? I can't tell you there's a day I don't see one fault. I see a fault here and there, and some days I'll see a lot of faults. I need to anoint my eyes. I need to ask the Lord to anoint my eyes. Because when we see through his eyes, we see only love. Only love. So everything else isn't quite there. So we need to ask the Lord to anoint our eyes this Christmas. Because as also there in red, the most encouraging bit of all of this is the reminder, and we've heard this in the Gospels, the reminder that he is standing at the door of your heart right now. He's standing at the door of your mind, and he's knocking. And he wants to give you amazing things. He wants to give you positive words on your tongue. He wants to give you a positive, encouraging word for your spouse, for your friend, for your employer, for a stranger, for the Salvation Army bell ringer, for the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts that are selling wreaths to make money for their troop, for the charity. How many times do you walk past the bell ringer and say, oh, I don't know if I have $1. Instead, say, thank you for doing this for us. God bless you. So Christmas is really about walking into the refiner's fire. It's about doing that through Advent, the journey of searching. It's about putting on that white robe after Christmas and feeling the purity that he has returned to your inner life. And it's about asking the Lord to anoint your sight. See only love. Let him knock on the door and open it.